Okay, well, thank you very much everyone for coming along today to the second of our events this London Climate Action Week. This session is called The Future of Travel. So just a kind reminder to please make sure if you can stay on mute while the speakers are presenting so that we don't have any background noise or any echo. But please do use the chat to ask questions throughout. We hope to have at least 10 minutes at the end to get onto those questions. If we don't have time, then we'll make sure that we follow up by email afterwards as well with answers to your questions. So in today's session, as I said, we have an absolutely packed agenda. We are going to be hearing from council officers in our climate emergency and transport teams, talking about travel and net zero and what the council's currently doing to address this. We've then got James, who'll be talking about engaging businesses with zero emission freight, and some brilliant stories from local residents Gary and Bea and their experience going car-free. And finally, we've got a session from Ria, Nikki and Savraj from Pedalback Cycling and United in H&F about their brilliant bike refurbishment scheme. But before we get onto that, I'm delighted to welcome Councillor Wesley Harcourt, Cabinet Member for Environment, who will say a few words before we get started.
Hi, thanks very much, Emily. Good morning, I think it's actually afternoon now, isn't it? Good afternoon, everyone. Can I just begin by welcoming you all to today's event, which is another one of the events we've got planned for as part of London Climate Week. At Hammersmith and Fulham Council, we're committed to facing the challenge of the climate and ecological emergency. It's actually one of the council's 6 key values, and it's a top priority. As I'm sure many of you realise, carbon emissions and air quality have such a direct effect on our health, our well-being, and indeed our quality of life. Today's topic is going to be about how we travel. Now, that's absolutely central to tackling climate change and air quality, because it doesn't matter whether we're visiting friends or family, commuting to school or to work. How we travel has a major impact on our environment. Now, our borough is, as I'm sure most of you know, is a really dense urban environment, but it's well served by public transport with lots of tube stations, rail hubs, bus routes and so on. And for instance, this makes things like the 20-minute neighbourhoods a real possibility. If you don't know what 20-minute neighbourhoods are, the basic idea is that people can access everyday needs within a 20-minute walk or cycle ride. We're doing our utmost, I suppose, to encourage people to switch to electric vehicles. I believe we're the leading borough with one of the largest charging point networks in the country. Our aim is to have, and there should be, over 1,000 in situ by the end of this year. We're also in the forefront with Parcels Not Pollution. That's our zero emission last mile delivery and courier service. And on top of that, we've introduced new services like car and van clubs, electric bike hire, e-scooter trials, and so on. Now, you know, despite all of these initiatives, we still need a big shift in how we travel. And the challenge is going to be, how do we enable and encourage more walking and cycling, people to transition to electric vehicles? How do we manage freight more sustainably? And how do we start thinking about road space being as an asset of our community? So today, we're going to be showcasing some of the amazing work that's already happening in our borough. And as Emily's already said, you're going to be hearing from some of the great organisations that are tackling the climate emergency and improving our local community. So enough from me, but I hope you'll come away feeling inspired and energised to help us making walking, cycling, public transport, car and van clubs and electric vehicles the norm in Hammersmith and Fulham. Enjoy the rest of this event.
Thank you very much for that introduction and welcome, Councillor Harcourt. So to kick us off, we've got Hanesh from the Climate Emergency Team with an introduction to travel and net zero.
Thanks, Emily, and thank you, Councillor Harcourt. Thanks, everyone, for joining. I'm Hanesh Mehta, the Strategic Lead for the Climate Emergency at Hammersmith and Fulham Council. So when we talk about the future of travel, you might think we're going to talk about some sort of dystopian future of flying cars and hyperloops that will whiz you across the world and back in an afternoon, or drones that will deliver your Amazon packages from the sky. But actually, we're here to talk about we're here to talk to you about the real future, which is happening right now, and it's happening all around us at the moment. And it's simply about walking more, cycling safely, and electrifying the vehicles that do need to drive in and around the borough. We've got a vision for what transport and travel looks like in a low carbon future, and that's in 2030, residents and visitors to the borough take pleasure in travelling by foot, bike and public transport along safe, healthy and green streets. The fewer vehicles that do remain on our roads are clean and zero carbon. Residents can make sustainable choices for travelling beyond the borough and make fewer polluting journeys overall to improve their well-being, with more walking and cycling overall. So travelling and transport have big roles to play in our net zero journey. Next slide, please, Emily. Road transport is responsible for 15% of the borough's emissions, and freight accounts for about 28% of fuel use, and the remaining 72% is mainly personal car usage. So as well as greenhouse gas emissions, transport also contributes to air and noise pollution with significant implications for biodiversity and public health. Whilst COVID-19 has changed travel behaviour, with people making far fewer journeys and opting to cycle and walk locally and staying local, there are still concerns around public transport use, and private motor vehicles could still increase. So travelling less is really key to reducing transport emissions. So we talk about a travel hierarchy, and facilitating things like remote working and providing services at a very local level to help us plan for less travel and rethink roads as assets of community value and ecological importance. So this transformation is going to require significant investment in infrastructure and public realm improvements and policies that will reward sustainable choices. Next slide, please, Emily. So at Hammersmith and Fulham, the council is building a net zero transport system and enabling active travel, traffic reduction, increasing electric vehicles, and improving public transport. And we're doing this through cycle lanes, protecting and improving public transport, installing charging points and more. The borough's transition to electric vehicles, next slide please, Emily. The borough is transitioning to an electric future, and we have 5% of all electric vehicles registered in London, and demand for charging points from residents and the number of electric vehicles registered in the borough have grown exponentially over the last few years. We now have a network of around 500 charging points, one of the largest networks in the UK. But even the manufacture of electric vehicles causes emissions and exploitation of mineral reserves, as well as producing air pollution from brake wear. So this leads me to handing over to the next slide and Richard Duffield.
Thanks, Hanesh. So over to Richard, who's our Borough Cycling Officer. Richard, just checking that you're there and not on mute.
Yeah, I thought you were unmuting me. Okay, hi everybody. I'm Richard Duffield. I'm the Borough Cycling Officer. I'm probably one of the very few people who actually has got a real positive out of the pandemic and the lockdown, in that what actually has happened is that the lockdown has rekindled everyone's love of cycling. And what you've probably heard and seen is that there's been a huge demand for bikes, for retailers, and our residents have all suddenly found that bike out in their garage or in their shed that they've always had there, but have never had the opportunity to ride. So the actual lockdown meant that there were less cars on the road and people could actually get out and about. Next slide, please. So when we talk about the demand, of course, many people who now see cycling as a great opportunity to not only for health and fitness, but also that commute to work. It means that most of them need places to park their bike safely. And over the years, we've started to introduce what we call the bike hanger units on our streets, where they take away some of the, where possible, the parking space, and where you can fit 6 bikes instead. During the lockdown, the demand for these across the boroughs has increased exponentially, as it has across most of London. So we recognise this, and we're going to work and do everything we can to increase the number and the opportunities for our residents to have safe security. Because there are many areas of our borough where the premises they live in don't actually have much storage. And so we need to do everything we can, and we will be doing everything we can to increase that storage. And for those of our residents who do travel to, to the sort of transport hubs like the main tube stations, we're looking at introducing, purpose-built cycle hubs, secure cycle hubs. The first one of these will be, as you can see in the bottom picture, at Hammersmith flyover on the south side. So we're hoping to open that later in the year, which is really great for our residents. And of course, with more people cycling, we're also keen to make sure that people have the opportunity to not only ride their bikes safely. And so we've been rolling out adult cycle training in lockdown and to the guidance rules. But we also recognise that many residents actually want to check their bike and have that checked by mechanics. So we've been rolling out doctor bike sessions, and in those doctor bike sessions, security of your bike is also important. So with the police, we offer secure bike markings. And then the next initiative that we'll actually be moving forward with is a scheme with Pedal My Wheels, which is try before you buy. So effectively, a lot of people go into a cycle shop and the bikes are on a rack, can't see whether it suits them or not. We'll actually be introducing across the borough a number of events where there'll be bikes for people to try, and you can actually rent the bikes effectively for a month before you decide whether or not you want to purchase it or not. And part of that initiative will also extend to cargo bikes. So they're an ever-increasing alternative to people to actually move their children, for example, to school, or they can actually use them for, transporting all kinds of, items, go shopping with them, carry all their shopping with them. So really, really great initiatives that we're actually working on. And to do that, we obviously recognise that actually we need to have the right infrastructure, the safe infrastructure that, is segregated from the cars. And many of you will have seen the temporary structures that we put in on some of our key routes. Well, we're going to upgrade these, and the Safer Cycle Pathway is our first priority. It'll run east to west in the borough from Goldhawk Road to Olympia through central Hammersmith. And then we've got a second route planned with TfL to go from Wood Lane in the north to Shepherd's Bush Green. And for those of you who may already have taken advantage of it, over the last 2 years, we've also upgraded the A40 along the Westway, and we've also, for the leisure cyclists, we've also upgraded the Quiet Way 2, which runs through the southern side of Wormwood Scrubs. So we recognise that cycling infrastructure is also critical to encouraging more and more people to cycle and cycle safely. I think that's it, Emily.
Thank you very much, Richard, for that. Please keep the questions coming. So do use the chat to ask any questions, and we will do our best to get through those at the end. Hanesh, do you just want to say 30 seconds about the Parcels Not Pollution scheme and how SMEs can access that?
Yeah, thanks, Emily, and thanks, James. I'm going to put the link in the chat for anyone who wants to sign up. But essentially, we're offering a £250 voucher to businesses and organisations in the borough to be able to use and trial that service. Very easy to use. It's the same or next day service, and you can redirect your incoming parcels via e-cargo bikes, and they'll do the last mile. The rider and cargo bike will come to you either the same day or next day, or you can use them for outbound deliveries as well. So if you're a business that sends goods to anywhere in the area, in the West London area, then you can try this service to do that. So I'll put the link in the chat if you want to sign up or share with others.
Great, thank you, Hanesh and James. And now we're going to hear the community perspective. So starting with Gary, we're going to hear some stories about going car-free.
Hi, everyone.
Can I just make sure that everyone else is on mute, if that's okay? I think there's a wee bit of background noise. But yeah, thanks, Gary.
No worries. Hi, I'm Gary. So I've lived in London now for about 25 years. And I grew up in Texas, where the car was king. But in a city like London, the car is not actually really necessary. So I sold my car here about 5 years ago because of some financial difficulties. And on the day I handed over the keys, I actually cried because I felt like I was losing like a part of my identity. The car was my personal space, and in some ways it was like an extension of my home. And I was scared that my life was just going to get smaller. So could I have the next slide, please? So my main concern was that I was going to be stranded, right? So how was I going to get to the shops? How was I going to carry my shopping? How would I run errands? What if I needed to travel out of London? But now, 5 years later, even though I can afford to buy another car, I don't miss owning one at all. Next slide, please. So for the vast majority of what I do, I actually walk, and I don't need the car. So I walk or cycle to the supermarket, which is about 10 minutes away. I used to drive that because the idea of carrying my shopping that far was pretty unimaginable. But now I don't even think about it. And on the few occasions that I do need a car, there's lots of options. So if I'm moving something, I'll use a zip car, and there's like dozens nearby. And if I need to get from A to B with something heavy like a suitcase, I'll use an Uber or a bus. And for longer journeys, like maybe a weekend out of London, I'll actually hire a car. Can I have the next slide, please? So I've actually saved over £2,000 a year from car insurance, parking permits, MOT, tax disc, petrol. And even when I'm using zip cars and Ubers, I'm still saving money on that. And zip cars are as cheap as £3.50 an hour, and they even include the petrol. So, but the most significant thing that I lost was stress. The stress of driving in London, sitting in traffic, road rage, parking fines, paying for parking. And even when I wasn't driving, the stress of like forgetting where I parked my car and worrying about it getting broken into or vandalized. But now most of my journeys are a lot less stressful, and they actually help me feel better. I'm more fit now. I've lost weight without a gym membership. And I really enjoy walking now. And the distances that I'm covering are getting longer and longer. So I often walk from my home on the Wandsworth Bridge Road up to, say, Sloane Square, or even into central London, which I once thought was ridiculously too far to walk. In Sloane Square, it's about a 45-minute walk on foot, and it's a really lovely walk. And I've discovered new shops, cafes, interesting sites, and I feel like I know my local community a lot better now. And none of this would have happened if I'd been in my car. And look, and while there's more that I could be doing, I do feel proud that by choosing not to drive, I'm not contributing to the congestion and the pollution that's clogging up our streets and our lungs. So my advice would be to simply try it. Make that conscious choice to explore your local area on foot. Just choose one time to do your big weekly shop on foot. And that might seem daunting, but until you do, you just won't know. So we all have to do what we can to address the climate crisis. We're all responsible collectively. So I invite you to be a part of that positive change. Take that step, and then another, and another, and another. Thank you. That's done.
That's great. Thank you so much, Gary, for sharing your story there. And now we're going to hear a similar resident story from B.
Thanks, Emily. Hi, I'm B. I'm also a local resident. I live on Wandsworth Bridge Road also. As a little bit of background about myself, I'm mum to 2 young boys, so we're just a family of 4 here. And I was a car owner for over 20 years. As soon as I turned 17, I got a car. It's just what you did. So what changed? So in 2017, I stumbled upon an advert on Gumtree for this battered out kind of, I don't know, it had its day really, but we did a little bit of refurbishment on it and we bought this cargo trike, and it really was a bargain price. We almost developed our own try before you buy scheme, I guess, before that was available. So I'm really pleased to hear that is available now. So we used this bike. It was heavy, it was clunky. It wasn't really a replacement for a car, I would say, but it definitely helped with the school run. because it was so heavy. I tried to avoid the main roads because I felt I couldn't go fast enough to compete with the cars because there weren't protected cycle lanes on the routes that I took. So I was really restricted to back roads. So again, it wasn't a replacement for a car, but I had set up an alert on Gumtree to let me know when other cargo bikes were coming up for sale. And next slide, please, Emily. In 2018, I had an alert come up for this e-cargo bike for sale. It was outside of London, quite far away in Englefield Green. So I jumped on the train and I bought it and cycled back, which was pretty scary because it was the first time I'd tried cycling one of these two-wheeler cargo bikes. They're very different to handle compared to a normal road bike, and also very different to the cargo trike. So that was a fun experience. But we used this bike, we loved it. We actually preferred it to the trike because we felt it maneuvered more like a real bike. It also had electric assist. We could go faster, which meant we could go on the main roads. It just opened up more of London to explore. So we found we used it on the weekends a lot more than we did the trike. It was just brilliant. So then the boys were getting bigger, and as you can see, they're kind of almost growing out of the bike there. We were at a point where we didn't know what to do next because we weren't sure if they would still fit in a cargo bike, but we did some homework. They were also moving to a school a bit further away, so we needed something a bit more powerful. It had a hill on the journey. So this is when we made the real investment, and we bought the Urban Arrow family. We bought it from new in 2019, and it's really been a game changer for us. We just didn't need to use the car anymore. We were able to take that bike and load it up with anything we wanted for the day. We've even taken it on holidays. We did a week on the Isle of Wight, car free with it. We cycled all the way to Guildford, and then from Guildford, we loaded it onto the back of a van to get to Portsmouth. And we also use it just for child-free days out. That's my husband having a picnic in Hyde Park recently. So yeah, we sold the car last year, and unlike Gary, I didn't cry. I felt free. I felt free from having to worry about MOTs, insurance and tax, and parking, all the other positives Gary talked about. I felt immediately, and haven't looked back.
Thank you so much, Bea and Gary, for sharing your stories there. I would absolutely love to try one of the e-cargo bikes. I think, yeah, I'll be first in the queue with a try before you buy, Richard. And our final section now is handing over to Nikki, Ria and Savraj from Pedalback Cycling and from United in Hammersmith and Fulham to tell us about their brilliant Pedal Gives Back scheme.
Hi there, I'm Nikki. I am one half of Pedalback Cycling. Ria's my wife. We start, just a little bit about us. We started Pedalback in 2015 in Tooting in an indoor market. It was just a tiny little cycle cafe, and we moved over to West Brompton 2.5 years ago. We have always been about trying to make cycling as inclusive as possible. It's traditionally very a little bit hostile environment walking into a bike shop. You don't really know much about bikes or you're scared to ask questions. So we've always been really mindful of trying to make it as community based and open as possible. Back in the start of the pandemic last year, we realised that there was a massive need for bikes from everyone, for health reasons, for being able to get out of the house, for your 1 hour exercise, but most importantly, for key workers, for transport, and particularly people on the lower end of the scale. If you work in a supermarket, you work in any form of public services, refuse collection, anything like that, you still had to go to work. You didn't have the luxury of being able to work from home or being furloughed. And we realised that people just couldn't access bikes. Even if you had the money, you couldn't buy a bike. There were none around. So we decided that there was a way we needed to connect bikes with people. A lot of train stations have huge amounts of abandoned bikes And we knew that if we could access those bikes, do them up as cheaply as possible and give them to people, it would be a real game changer. So we banged on a lot of doors and finally connected with Harriet, who is the Compliance and Regulatory Manager for South West Railway. Harriet has been absolutely amazing. She has done so much legwork, which I can't even begin to underestimate in the midst of the strongest part of the lockdown last year. Coordinating the effort to get all these abandoned bikes collected from various stations that South West Railway run, getting British Transport Police to check all the bikes to make sure that they weren't stolen, and then coordinate with us to get the bikes over to our shop. And that was the beginning of Pedal Gives Back. We managed to get that in place, and then the next part of it was trying to connect the bikes to people that needed them most. And that's where we hit a bit of another brick wall. We realised that we were good at fixing bikes, but not very good at working with the local, knowing who to contact with local charities and not-for-profit groups and make sure the right people got the bikes. Again, we sort of tried to reach out to lots of people, and luckily we connected with Savraj from United in Hammersmith and Fulham. They work with all sorts of non-profit and community groups across the borough, which was just amazing. That meant that we had a way to connect with the people that would need the bikes. Together, we applied for a walking and cycling grant for the project, and happily we got grant funding to continue the project for 2 years. We estimate during that time we'll be able to upcycle and donate up to 50 bikes a year to residents that are really in need of a bike. So over the course of the 2 years, we will have given over 100 people in the borough a bike that they can use for transport, for exercise, for whatever their needs are. We'll have also saved all those bikes from going into a landfill. And what we're doing is a lot of the bikes that we get from the train stations are really unrideable, but we're using them to sort of cannibalise, to use parts of, to use onto the other bikes, as well as refurbishing them, some of them with new parts and stuff. So we, together with United in Hammersmith and Fulham, have managed to, so far, I think we've connected bikes with about 20 residents in the borough. And obviously we've got the rest of this year and the whole of next year funded to keep the project running, which is really great. So the way that the project works at the moment, anyone that works like a not-for-profit group within the borough can refer candidates to United in Hammersmith and Fulham. There is a selection criteria. We want these bikes to go to people that are in need, so people that are on universal credit, in receipt of benefits, key workers, people on low incomes, so that this is a bike that people would not necessarily have traditional ways to access bikes. I'm not sure if Savraj is on the call at the moment, because she was joining us a bit later. I was hoping that she would be here to talk a little bit about some of the people that have received bikes so far and what that's meant to them. So I'm not, Emily, is Savraj on the call yet?
Savraj, are you here?
No, maybe not.
Yeah,
like she's actually on a training course today and was hoping to be able to nip out for a bit just to drop into the call. But yeah, so what we've also been trying to do is trying to make really push the project out amongst as many diverse groups within the borough as we possibly can, to try to reach as many people, people that are a lot older, people that are trying to get into work, people that would not traditionally have been cycling. So we're using our charity partners through the borough to try and increase cycling amongst our BAME communities, amongst like gender variant communities, different age groups, to try and sort of promote cycling as much as possible, because it just makes such a difference to people's physical health, mental health, to the environment, to, I mean, literally across the board, there's no downside to it. So yeah, we're really pleased to be able to do this and get this off the ground. And it's a shame that Harriet and Savraj aren't here to tell a little bit about their side. But yeah, so we hopefully we've got this running for the whole of next year as well, and save more bikes from the dump and give more people bikes that need bikes.
Thank you so much, Nikki, for that talk. I know that there's a video here, so what I'll do is I'll make sure we circulate that with everyone afterwards as well. I think it's a bit bitty if I share it through my screen, so I'll make sure that everyone can watch a really brilliant 2-minute video about the project as well. But thank you to all of our speakers today. I think we've heard about what's happening at the council, we've heard about what is happening in the community, and we've heard some resident stories. So we've now got some time for a Q&A. So I wondered if Simone, if there's anything that's coming up in the list of questions that you wanted to start with.
Hi, thank you, Emily. So there's been a lot of positive comments and a lot of questions too. A lot of these have been answered along the way, but in case people have missed the answers, I will read a few out. So first of all, there's been a lot of questions and comments on the bike hangers, that they're too expensive and making it unavailable for some. So is there any possibility that we could tackle this problem?
Richard, is that something you want to answer?
Yeah, we recognise that not everybody's able to pay the rental fee. So we're looking at the design of the units themselves and trying to get a more flexible system, so that instead of the key system that currently is available, we're actually looking at an app-based system that actually will have so basically you'll have an electronic way of getting into a unit, and strange enough, that actually hopefully will reduce the cost significantly. So not only do we get a more flexible system for people to use the hangars across the borough, but actually there'll be hopefully a reduction in cost to people who want to rent it.
Great, thank you. And going back to the cycle hangers again, there's been questions about the aesthetic value of them, and people are wondering if there's any possibility of adding green roofs or planters.
I agree with everybody, they're horrible, but I have to say that they're the only thing that's available. We're looking at how we can make them more aesthetically pleasing by, I think, trying to incorporate them in more parklets and, have the greening. I don't think you can put greening on the roof because the roof actually opens on most of them. But there's no reason why we can't make the area around the parklet, around the bike hanger, a more aesthetic place, where there's maybe seating and trees and greening as well. So we're looking at that as well as rolling that out.
Great, thank you. And there's been a lot of questions about the safe cycle lanes. So will the temporary COVID lanes be made permanent and upgraded? I think this is a question for Hinesh, possibly.
It's probably actually for either Richard or I to take that one, and I think the answer to that question is at the moment we don't have the funding secured to make the route permanent. We've got an outline funding to install an interim scheme, and by interim I think that's really an upgrade of the material. So we're looking at the current red and white barriers that you're seeing there out. We want to upgrade them to using materials like rubber curbing or segregating it using ones. But with that, I'd just like to affirm that the aspiration is a public realm enhancement. That's always been the case, and we're hoping that the interim scheme will be a step for us to be able to leverage the further funding needed to install a permanent solution as well. And also, while I'm talking about the cycle schemes, I think it's probably also worth mentioning, I think there was a question from Casey here on the pace as well. Aside from the complex stakeholder environment we're navigating with our funding partners, one of the key things to also bear in mind as well is the temporary schemes went in quite quickly during a national crisis. With the interim or the next stage, what we're really, really keen to do is make sure that what we put out there is an inclusive and accessible design as far as practically possible. And that's why we're engaging with our disabled residents team to try and work through some of the concerns that they've raised with us with the temporary scheme and try and find a practical solution to that as well. And therefore, that additional work on the design aspects of the scheme is taking us longer, and that's something to bear in mind. And really, this engagement we're hoping to continue. So we do have also a cycling and walking residents commission. We've got the disabled residents team as well. And as we talk about the interim scheme, we're also starting that early dialogue about what the permanent scheme not only should look like, but how will it be used by our community, and that's the other aspect of it. So we do appreciate it. It is taking us some time, but this is a very, very necessary and important step and process for us to take.
Thank you. Our next question is, are there any repair or cycling training available?
In terms of, we offer full adult cycle training across the borough. We have two providers, and they've rolled out even during the pandemic. I think they've trained over 200 of our residents, and there's no age gap on these. I think the oldest person we've trained recently was 75, I believe. So we don't have any issues with age. Obviously, we run cycle training in schools, but also I say it's been very noticeable, and we'll be certainly developing this further, that the adult cycle training is a very key delivery plan for us. And interestingly, we've had an incredible uptake from some of our our ethnic groups, and that where people of those groups don't normally cycle, and they've suddenly found that they can cycle, and it's been absolutely amazing. So yes, we do that. I say in terms of the actual training to be your own mechanic, that's slightly different. We have run courses through our Bike Works connection, and I believe they're still available, but unfortunately because of COVID they've been quite difficult to run. So we'll be reintroducing those when it's safe to do so. So you can book on a course for a Saturday morning for an hour or 2 hours, and that will teach you the basics.
Great, thank you. And we now have a question about Hammersmith Bridge. So the person asking the question finds it disturbing that the plan is to have the cars at the top of the bridge and then pedestrians beneath. And they're wondering if there's, I guess the question is there any possibility that we can open it so that it's for pedestrians and cyclists only, not cars?
I don't know if anyone on the call can take that question, Simone. It might be one that we have to come back to. I don't think any of us are closely involved in the Hammersmith Bridge project, so we'll have to take that one away.
Can I just come in on that one? Yep, and that particular idea is just one of the ideas that's being pushed at the moment about a temporary structure with the two-level bridge until such times the bridge can be fully repaired. Obviously, you've probably seen in the press recently, part of the settlement between government and Transport for London involved government putting up 1/3 for the cost, TfL 1/3, and the borough having to put up 1/3. Now that's an enormous amount of money, even 1/3 of the cost of just the stabilisation work. It's about 1/3 of about 40, 41, 42 million pounds, which would put an enormous amount of money onto things like council tax. So we're looking at other ways of dealing with that, such as road charging and such like, but we're still in negotiation with that. And obviously the first thing will be to get the bridge open as soon as possible, as soon as it's safe to do so, to pedestrians and cyclists. Obviously, the aspiration was originally at some stage was to get it reopened to vehicles, but I think that's a little way longer in the future, given that the amount of money that's required for that is in the 140, possibly rising to 160 million pounds, which is way beyond the amount that any local borough is going to be able to do. But as I say, as soon as it's safe, and we've got engineers who are finalising reports and such like, we'll see whether whether the bridge can be reopened as soon as we've got the money to get the stabilisation work done.
Thank you very much, Councillor.
Thank you,
Harcourt.
Councillor.
Simone, can I just check how we're doing for time?
We've still got 10 minutes, so there's one or two quick questions we can ask. So this is for Nikki, Pedalback Cycling. Do you stock e-bikes?
Yeah, hi, we do. We work with a company called Volt. They're a London-based e-bike company. Yeah, we've got bikes at the shop that are available for test rides. So yeah, if anyone did want to try an e-bike, no problem to book in and arrange a test ride.
Thank you. And another quick question is, can we have a method for local cyclists to provide feedback on dangerous pinch holes and potholes, raised curbs, etc.?
Yeah, that's the council's website allows that, and you can always send an email to cycling@lbhf.gov.uk, and we'll deal with those all the time. We also receive feedback from the local cyclist group, HF Cyclists. So yeah, there's a number of ways, but we're always happy to receive any comments and about concerns that cyclists have.
Thank you. And I think the last quick question we have time for is it easy to donate an old bicycle for repair and giving it to someone else?
Yeah, hi. Yeah, absolutely. We have had a number of residents that have donated bikes already. So yeah, we happy to have bike donations. We're at 24 Lily Road. So if you do have an old bike that you want to donate so that we can refurbish that bike and pass it on to someone in need, then definitely drop in and see us or give us a call, and we'll definitely happily accept any bike donations. Thank you.
Nikki, I could just add there, we work with Bike Works, and we're one of the repositories, so anybody with a bike from wherever they are in London can drop it off with us. We look after it, and then once a month they come and collect them, and then they're refurbished and sent out to all sorts of people that need them. So if your warehouse gets full, they can always come over to us in Notting Hill, so 69 St Mark's Road.
Thanks, Simone. Should we do 2 more questions and then wrap up?
Yes, I saw one question, but we're getting so many comments, I'm losing these questions. There was one question asking about if they don't live in the borough, but they need their bike repaired, would they be able to come to the borough to get it repaired?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we're not the only bike shop in the borough. I don't want to claim the monopoly. There's lots of bike shops in the borough. But yeah, absolutely. What I just want to make a distinction between is that we are a working bike shop. It is a bike business that fixes and sells bikes. The Pedal Gives Back project is separate to that. And that is a grant funded project that is connecting abandoned bikes that we do up to local residents. So in terms of fixing bikes, whether you live in the borough or outside of the borough, yes, we do that, but that is a separate thing that we do in the bike shop. That's not our grant funded project. All right.
And the answer is as well as what Nikki said, is that we do offer, as I said previously, doctor bike sessions across the whole length and breadth of the borough. So you'll have to, I'll make available where they're happening on the website, but also other local boroughs also have doctor bike sessions. So you don't have to, if you don't live in the borough, you don't necessarily have to travel into the borough to have a doctor bike session. I know colleagues in Hounslow and KNC have those sessions as well.
Thank you. And last quick question, I'll actually put 2 in one. Can the council enforce anti-idling and no parking on cycle lanes?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can. I think my colleague's not here today, but I think one of the things that he would say on that is with the no idling, of course, it's got to be observed as well. So a lot of the time, the civil enforcement officers, you know, come up and the engine's turned off just before, you know, a ticket can be issued. But that's certainly something we're hoping to, you know, increase our enforcement activity on as well. On cycle lanes, there has been a legislation change as well, which now allows us, if it's an advisory cycle lane, we can't enforce, but if it's a dedicated cycle lane, we can. So something like the safer cycle pathway, when that becomes a permanent scheme, we can actually enforce if someone drives on it who's not cycling as well. So that's something for the future for us to consider its application as well.
Thank you, Masim. Thanks, Simone, for hosting that. And a big thank you to all of our speakers, to Councillor Harcourt for opening the session today, to Hinesh, Richard, James, Gary B, and Nikki as well. Just before we wrap up, it is London Climate Action Week, so we are launching the Climate Community Map. This was one of the recommendations of our resident-led Climate and Ecological Emergency Commission, and it's about showing all of the brilliant things that are already happening across the borough to tackle the climate emergency. So have a look at what's on the map, find out what's in your neighbourhood, but also tell us what's missing. We want to hear about the great things that are happening near you that we can celebrate and showcase what's happening across the borough. And we have also just launched a newsletter, a monthly newsletter called Climate Connects. And this shows what the council's doing to take climate and ecological action, as well as stories from the community. And you can also find out what we're reading and sharing and projects to get involved in. So please do sign up for that and have a look at that coming into your inboxes as well. And final plug for our 3 other lunchtime events this week. Join us every day at 12 o'clock. Tomorrow we'll be talking about low waste living. On Thursday, we'll be talking about biodiversity. And Friday, what are the impacts of climate change going to be in Hammersmith and Fulham, and how can we protect our communities and places against those. But thank you very much, everyone, so much for coming along today. It's been great to have such a good session with so many questions. That's our team email there if you have any questions, and we'll be sharing this recording and the slides afterwards. But I hope you have a nice rest of the day, and thanks for coming along.